Welcome back to another episode of Real Estate Unplugged. I'm very excited to have my guest today, Sajit Sankar. And, for those who are listening for the first time, this podcast is really about the journey of corporate real estate professionals and the lessons that they've learned along the way. So as we like to do at the beginning of every episode, Sajit, would you be kind enough to introduce yourself?
Hi, Greg, and happy to do that. So I am the Vice President for Corporate Real Estate for MasterCard. In my role, I do a few things. I lead the design and build for MasterCard offices globally. I also lead the M&A, real estate technology, and workplace strategy for MasterCard globally in the real estate function. And one job is not enough, so I do another one as well. I also lead the real estate for Latin America and North America as well.
Is that it?
Well, for now.
So let's turn back the dial and start with your background. Meaning, where are you from originally? Where did you grow up? And what do you want to be when you grow up?
Thank you for asking that question. Well, I really wish I had that clarity at that age, because at that point in time, there was a different story. But I grew up in India. I was born to a military family. My father was a military officer. My grandfather was in British military as well. And so in my father's and uncles and cousins all were in military. So I pretty much grew up in what you call as a military zone. And my childhood was turbulent because we used to move every 2 years to a different station. So wherever the military station was, I would move. Schools were changing, friends were changing, and the environment was different. So the only constant in my life when I was a child was a uniform and weapons and orders. And when I say orders, that means order of doing things, right? So there was a precision to everything about how we packed, how we unpacked, what we did, and how the routine was, and things like that. So routine was a constant. You're seeing a uniform was a constant. And then my father was in active duty. So we had a lot of people with a lot of weapons. So weapons were never a strange thing for me as well. So that was my childhood. When you were brought up in an environment like that, you automatically gravitate towards what's in that environment. And that was join the military. So I wanted to join the military. And in formative years, I kind of realized that I peeled into what arm of military do I want to go into and what excited me most and things like that. So my father was, of course, a paratrooper. So I was more excited towards being a paratrooper, but there was a little bit of a pull for me to do something else. And in artillery for me was exciting as well, but ultimately I ended up being paratrooper. But that is what I was what you call as angling towards when I was growing up, being a military officer, But had I known that real estate is where I will make my mark, I would have chosen different subjects, different topics to think about, different books to read about, but that did happen.
So at what age did you go into the military?
17.
And
18, yes, 18. So I went to the Officers Training Academy at 19, I was commissioned. I did 3 tours, all 3. One of them was jungle warfare. Other 2 were urban warfare. So I was deployed. And while I was in military, I chose special forces. So, you don't automatically get into special forces. You have to qualify. There's a probation period that you have to go through, and you kind of do that. So I was in special forces for a while. And then from special forces, after some years, I was deployed in a different wing, which was in counterinsurgency and covert operations that I was with Army.
And because I'm not incredibly familiar with the different roles within the military, when you say you were in special forces, what does that mean? To the uninitiated.
So we weren't deployed under normal circumstances. A regular military would be deployed in a normal circumstances, doing regular military jobs. We were deployed for special reasons. So if there was a situation like a hijacking, if there was a situation like a hideout to be busted, if there was a situation where the insurgents or terrorists were housed in a different country, but you had to be flown in there covertly to do seek and destroy, then we would be deployed in that situation. And in that situation, it is quite intense because there are months and months of planning that happens. It doesn't happen overnight. You don't get a call and say, chopper. You actually know what you're going to go after. And that's where the special forces part of it comes. In the counterinsurgency part, it's a little more active. You're not in the uniform. You have to blend in with the environment. You have to adapt to the local cultures, and you have to covertly find out what's going on and then fix a target. And sometimes those targets are not neutralized through traditional methods. There are unconventional methods used. There was a situation where I had to actually drain somebody's bank account to break that chain, right? So that is also a covert operation. So so that was the difference. So that switch happened from a physical warfare to a counterinsurgency warfare within the military.
And so, how many years in total were you in the military?
8 years.
8 years. And is it? I don't know if it's an inappropriate question to ask, so please let me know. Did you enjoy your time in the military?
Oh, I was. It came to me as natural, right?
It's just sort of secondhand. It's just what you knew.
Yeah. That's all I knew, right? I mean, I saw my father do this. I saw my grandfather do this. I saw my uncles do this. I was born in military cantonment. That's all I knew. I mean, I did not know life beyond that. For me, everybody else was a civilian.
Right.
For me, when I saw somebody in those days, there were no cell phones and there was no I saw a display of wealth. I always thought, well, that's somebody else's choice. That's not my choice. Right. So, it was kind of, that's the choice I made.
Right.
Yes.
So you're 25, you're 26 years old, and does a light go off, or is it is there an event that makes that changes your path?
I would say it was a series of events, So I had battle injuries. I was not getting into shape that I wanted to be. I wanted to go back into a certain division, which demanded high physical capabilities. And, because of my battle injuries, I was not getting there. So, and I was okay with it because I was doing a lot of interesting things, but it was eating from inside, right? Because when I joined, that was the purpose, right? And then over a period of time, as I grew in the ranks and I was acting major at that point in time, I had to get myself involved in a lot of paperwork, which means it was not just the operation part of it. It was also presenting the operations in the right way to get sanctions for approvals for funding or resources and things like that. So I got involved in those write-ups, and one thing led to another. At some point in time, I remember I had a sustained period of time where I was doing planning, and I was part of the ops planning team. And that was the first time I sat on a computer. I did not know how a computer worked. So I had a course that I had to do to learn. In those days, DOS and MS. there were languages that we were taught, and we did that. And we were told at that point in time, this is the future. And I said, if that's the future, my future is doomed because I am so not good at it, right? So that's how I laughed about it, but I literally did not know that I'm going to do that, right? So it was a series of events, but I still remember a point where, so we were waiting for, we were in a odd place, jungle, middle of something. We were waiting for our ride to come. The chopper was about an hour and a half away, so we were sitting down, and I was chatting to one of my best friends, and who was with me in that operation, and he ended up talking about an example of how one of our friends went out and he went into a security business, and now he's got multiple clients, and that's how it is. So I said, I won't do that. I would do something else. I wouldn't want to be a private gun. He said, what would you become? And I said, I don't know that, but maybe a manager in a company. That's how I said it, manager in company. He laughed. Yeah, manager, right? Okay, let's move. Let's manage ourselves right now, and we laughed it off. But it stayed back with me. I think partly that is the moment where I thought about what do I want to do, Yep. And there were multiple agencies which kind of were keen on hiring special forces officers for various purposes. All of them related to security, right? And a lot of them had a lot of money in the game. A lot of our colleagues were doing gigs. They would form a company and they would do executive production and things like that. And there was a lot of money in that, right? But I just didn't want to be a private gun, Right. And that's where I started looking for avenues. But that point was a flashpoint for me, where I realized that, am I something beyond just what I know? Can I get out of my comfort zone?
So you got comfortable with being uncomfortable, and help us fill in the blanks between there and now. So how do you get, there you are in the jungle, having that conversation, you have an aha moment, and here you are now. So I'd be fascinated, be really interested to hear, how do you make that transition? What was the path you took to here?
Yeah. In those days, I'm talking 99, 2000, right? Those days, .com was a boom, and a lot of IT jobs were coming through. So my first thought was, maybe I go back to that computer I don't like and learn some more of that. And that's how I may become a manager. In my head, that target of becoming a manager became ingrained. Mm-hmm. So I was like, I have to be a manager. And maybe a computer would. I did not know anybody who did a job like that.
I really didn't even know what that job was. You just it just seemed like it made sense.
Right. And I still remember my first job, my first PowerPoint. Oh my God, it was a nightmare for me. I sweated because I couldn't produce, even if I wanted to, a decent PowerPoint, on that. And by the way, I do that for a living today, So, the natural thought was that let's start with being a security manager, so that you're on the planning side and you're not really on the execution side. So there were many companies who would hire a security manager for their buildings, large buildings, and take care of the building protection, right? I was surprised how saturated that market was. I was surprised because I was just another bloke who came out of Melody and was looking into it. So I didn't have much headway there. So one of these visits that I was doing, I happened to be in an under construction building. It was a campus. There was an under construction building, and I ended up meeting somebody who was doing construction job, and I chatted up. Oh, yeah, I was looking for the security job here, and then we ended up chatting. And this person said, "You know what? They're looking for people in procurement. Why don't you apply?" And I had some idea of procurement because in my previous job, I had to procure a few things. I was doing when I was doing, when we had to procure sizable amount of logistics all around the place and get it to one place. And I knew the means and method of doing it. I just hadn't procured something outside in the civilian world. So I said, okay, I'm going to give it a shot. And they just happened to be looking for a person who would challenge status quo, who would come with a lot of integrity, because apparently the previous person didn't have some of that. So I just happened to have a natural window to get in construction environment. And then within the construction environment, I realized that once the construction is done, somebody manages the space as well. And they had a manager title for facilities, which I applied for. So I did that. They didn't take me as a manager, of course. They took me as a senior facility executive. And then I grew from that to an assistant manager to a manager. But that was the first moment where I entered into the world of real estate. But then anybody who works in real estate knows this is one of the space, right? It is just facility management is just one of the realm, in the entire realm of corporate real estate. So during this path, I learned a lot about industries, sectors, segments, and what does this mean to real estate? What do people in real estate do for these companies, right? And then I discovered the food chain of transaction, project management, and the workplace strategy and technology related to it, and then the strategy behind it and things like that. I don't think for a long time I saw anybody in C-suite for a long time because there was no window for a real estate person to be in C-suite.
Right.
That opportunity just didn't exist because everybody seemed to have bought real estate, repaired their garage, or know how to fix a bulb. So nobody cared about what it was. But they did need somebody when something goes wrong. So the next best thing was resilience, business resilience, right? How do we make sure the generator never goes out of fuel? How do we make sure water doesn't go out? How do we make sure there's enough bulb supply? So then it came to, again, planning and resilience, business resilience. So I got interested in that. And in IBM, I did that, a lot of that. And Bank of America was all about that. Bank of America was fantastic learning ground for me. And that's the point in 2008 when the world was crashing all around. I realized that unless you look at every angle of real estate, which is on the developer side, occupier side, and the supplier side, you don't complete the circle. So I had done developer, I had done occupier, I wanted to do a supplier side. And that's how I joined Cushman & Wakefield. It was a fantastic ground. But then what Cushman & Wakefield did was they tapped on my planning skills, and they kept me on the business development side. So I didn't sign up for that role. I was actually forced into that role, saying, "Hey, you're going to do this as a, So I was entrusted with a small business that I had to grow, and rest is history. It became a $55 million business P&L. I was managing the region before I knew I was managing 2 countries, and then the whole region, and it was amazing. And what it did was it gave me a view to residential sector, industrial sector, hospitality, healthcare, financial sector, and it just opened up a more broader. But while I was doing that, I also realized that education plays a big role in that. You don't just get this because you have a title, you have to learn as well. So back in 2005, I did my lead certification from Green and GBCI, and then I embarked on this MCR journey. Before that, I did my CFM and FMP, and then I went on to do an RHCS course, and I then went on to do an MBA. So there were a whole lot of things that happened in this period of time, 15 years. But if I was to summarize it, the quest for learning never stopped, and I didn't stop doing courses and relevant educations even during the day job, right? And that made me wiser with every passing day. So that's kind of evolution that happened. I still find myself in a blur when I think about how did this happen? But I think education played a big role in these professional courses played a big role in growing the way I was able to bring things on the table.
And then after Cushman, that was the opportunity presented itself to come to MasterCard?
Oh, so I knew Mike Case. Cushman, my boss, I worked for Michael Case, fantastic friend of mine, thorough gentleman, very positive person. I mean, I feel like he's the most positive person I've met. And Mike was a client of mine. So we used to meet a lot. And when he said, have you ever thought of coming on this side? I said, yes, I was on this side because I was in Bank of America. And I feel like service provider role is more fulfilling for me because, partly because I loved hunting and I enjoyed hunting new clients, building relationships, getting business, securing mandates. A lot of that thrill was there, right? In a day, you meet 5 different companies and 5 different people from different walks, and that thrill was amazing. So he said, yeah, so you like sales, huh? I said, no, it's not sales. It's just that I like anything to do with real estate when I get to meet different people. So he actually had a vision about how MasterCard's real estate is evolving and what he saw. And he actually shared that vision with me, and he waited on 6 months with me to get on board. So he was super kind. He knew that that he and I would work very well. He knew that he and I would be a great partner. So he brought me on board, and here I am 7 years, and I'm still going.
So first of all, thank you for sharing that story. It's pretty amazing to think about where you were to where you are, and all that you've accomplished along the way. So congratulations, because you achieved your goal.
Yeah, I still remember my goal of being a manager in civil world. Yeah, so yes, in a way.
So when we were talking before the recording, we were talking about hiring and the role that you're in, and hiring professionals and what you look for and characteristics you look for, and you talked about the veteran's journey, and how that was something that was so dear to your heart. So I was hoping you could share that with the audience. I think it's really a twofold question. One, what are the characteristics that you look for in someone for young professionals who are listening, who are looking to get involved in corporate real estate? And then perhaps you can share the message that you have with regards to veterans and their the uphill battle they face.
Yeah, sure. Happy to. I felt the pain. I know how it feels when you leave a secure environment that you're used to, and you think and you believe that this is the only thing you know and you can do, because that's the biggest chain somebody ties to themselves. Oh, this is what I know, and this is what I'm good at, and this is the only thing I can do. And I think that military does that because it specializes you. It taps on your special skills to handle a situation, a weapon, a conflict. It conditions you in such a way that when you're in it for a long time, you feel like this is the only thing I do, and I know, and I am good at. And there can't be a more stronger chain than this one. Because when you're tied with that chain, you're casted, you're set, you find it hard to break the mold. You find it daunting, and you actually feel scared about it as well. Because if somebody had hired me for executive production, I won't even blink an eye, right? I know what I'm looking for. If somebody hired me to manage their real estate, I would be out of my depth. Why so? Not because I haven't learned about real estate, because I believe that that's the only thing I can do is weapons and tactics and situations. targets and goals. You have to break that mold, and it can only happen when you either you find a mentor, good mentor who understands you and coaches you, or you get on a self-realization journey to understand what do you want, what is making you unhappy, what is it that you want to do, and then find a way to get on that self-realization, way to get on that path, right? The second one is a little difficult because then you're on your own in your head. You're trying to think of an ambition. And if that ambition is inaccurate, or for that matter, too tall, you don't know how many steps that are involved to reaching there, or which path leads to it. Is this the right path, or do I have to take a hook and be on the right-hand side or left-hand side?
But let me ask you this. Are you suggesting that it's somewhat of a self-limiting belief that folks believe that they're in this hole and what they have prepared for is all they are good at, and that they need to understand that their skills are applicable to lots of other areas of lots of other industries as well?
That is correct. And that's correct. That what you just said is applicable to the civilian world as well as
to every industry, to every person who could be listening.
You are beyond your job. Your job doesn't define you. The day you think your job is defining you, that fancy title you have and the company you work for, or your definition is way beyond the job that you do. And that moment of realization usually is hard to come by when you're in a strong organization like military,
right?
Where the doctrination is all about conditioning individual to become what they want you to become, right? So that conditioning is where you have to believe, you should know that you can do something beyond your job.
So to highlight that, what are some of the characteristics that you look for or you believe benefit someone who is in the corporate, who's coming up in the corporate real estate industry?
First thing that I look for, and this is the topmost thing that I look for, is adaptability. If you're rigid, this is the only way to do it, then you're already blocked. Then yes, you can be hired for a role, you'll stay in that role, you only do that role, you'll do it every day, and you'll do nothing else.
Right.
If I see adaptability, that's the first thing for me. I see the person adaptable, and adaptability comes out in many conversations. The second quality that I look for is this person able to read the room? And it's a hard quality to look for because, it's one thing to be self-aware. It's another thing to be aware of your surrounding. And reading the room, usually in a leadership role I hire mostly leadership. I mean, directors and vice presidents is what I've hired in past, and I look for that quality. Is this person able to read the room? Are you going to just look at a PowerPoint and keep reading and keep saying what you came here to say for, or are you going to listen to what the audience is saying and then pivot? Oh, okay, that's what you want to talk about? Let's talk about that. Forget about my presentation. Let's talk. If you don't have that quality to maneuver and read the room, sometimes these meetings become painful. And then what you don't lose is not just the audience, you also loses your sponsors and your believers who you came for, right? I mean,
right.
Yeah, in that meeting. So I look for those two things for sure. The other thing that I definitely look for is attitude. I always believe in hiring for attitude and not just for skill set. Baseline skill set is fine. We can build upon it. So I wouldn't hire a chef for for a gardener role. I'm just giving an analogy here. I don't want to put a square peg in a round hole. So yes, basic, that field, yes, but attitude, because everything else is customizable. We anyway don't write our job descriptions to 100%, because no job description is 100%. There's always a 30 to 40% wriggle room in what you can become once you take that job, or what you can make that job about.
Right.
You write something and you get somebody with 30 to 50% of it, and you have great attitude, the person is adaptable, is smart enough to read the room, they will carve out their role, because they will go beyond this role and they will grow, and they will in fact create depth within the role itself. So that's how I look at when I go in to meet somebody.
And just a small plug, because you and I had the pleasure of meeting because of CoreNet. So I'm just thinking about, for young professionals, a wonderful organization to become involved in is CoreNet, to be able to give exposure to so many different resources and education about the industry, that I think that's an important framework that can help really boost anyone who's interested in commercial real estate roles.
I would agree 100% and more, actually. My journey CoreNet has had a profound impact on my journey. Back in 2006, when I first learned about CoreNet, and I was on a web page, and it led me to another, how you go into, and there it was. And I did not know anybody who was part of CoreNet. So I had to actually find. But then the platform itself was so friendly, they kind of reached out and they said, yeah, this is what. And then when I looked at it, I was amazed at how much of this I don't know. So the journey I did a MCR, and then I did workplace strategy specialization, do the MCRW, then I did an SLCR. I actually started teaching MCR courses. So I'm an instructor with, I volunteer for this instructor role in IFMA and as well as CoreNet for these subjects, be it operational efficiency, be it finance, or be it enterprise alignment. Some of these courses, they've had a profound impact. I think any young professional, and now the Gen Z, and there are more who are coming into this guided. I think the guidance path is very clear. You have to look at IFMA, you have to look at CoreNet, you have to look at GBCI, you have to look at RICS, you have to look at some of the BIFMA. I mean, some of these platforms are so strong, they are so full of knowledge that you don't have to, you can channelize yourself just by going through these organizations. And CoreNet did majority of my channelization back in 2006. GBCI and lead certification was an amazing learning for me. It's still relevant. And sometimes when I sit through sustainability meetings, I just thank that I did that in 2002 and I learned about it. So it's an ever evolving situation in sustainability, but some of the organizations that I mentioned are absolutely worth taking a look at by any young professional.
I appreciate the time that you have shared with us. So I want to be incredibly respectful of your time. As a takeaway, if you could share, given your 20 plus years of experience in the industry, it'd be interesting to hear if you could just share a mistake that you have made along the way that was ultimately an incredibly valuable teaching lesson, learning lesson for you that taught you something.
Sure. I think the biggest mistake I've ever made is every time I've assumed something is when I've gone wrong. It's easy to assume because you have peripheral knowledge and then you are looking for an outcome. So you assume with your peripheral knowledge that that's the outcome I'm looking for. This is what I know. Let's just assume that's going to happen. And every time I've done that, I've gone wrong. I just couldn't do a safe assumption because sometimes with all your knowledge, assumptions just are not safe.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I look back at a failure, I look at, I shouldn't have assumed that. I shouldn't have assumed this will happen because all of this is done, you know. So that's my big lesson. Whenever I go into a situation, I just don't assume. I don't assume diversity. I don't assume inclusion. I don't assume communication. I don't assume, anything. And when you don't have that, you're careful about, and you look at everything. You cover all your bases. That's one. Second is, and this is another big learning for me. And military does that for a lot of veterans as well, right? Your operation becomes critical and the most important thing for you because that's what it is. That's the last mile, right? Because whatever you're doing is the most important thing. Now, somewhere, somebody is looking at the bigger theater of the war. Somebody knows that if you get that rebel camp or you blast that bridge, something somewhere will happen. You don't know that. You just think that this is the only thing that's going to win the war.
Right.
Yeah. So when I compare that to this to the larger enterprise world in the corporate world, real estate people, they think everybody will speak brick and mortar language. Everything is about real estate. Everything is what they do is the only important thing. I think there is an enterprise lens to it. So unless you put a enterprise lens and then the business lens and then the financial lens and then the real estate lens unless you apply these lenses, you won't know the big picture. And assuming that real estate lease and renewal or acquisition or a location is the only thing that is a driver is a mistake. And then when you go into these meetings, alignment meetings, and you're meeting your stakeholders, you're full of yourself and real estate story. You're not even listening to what the business is saying or what the business goal is. Sometimes the business goal involves not just real estate, but other things as well. So I think that's something that I've learned hard way.
Yep.
You're not just what you are doing. There is a bigger picture. Always, expand your horizon, understand your enterprise, look at what the enterprise goal is, and then look at what you're doing.
Well, we'll leave it with that. Sajit, thank you so much for your time. Again, this has been Real Estate Unplugged. My name is Greg Cohen. My guest, Sajit Sankar. And if you like what you're listening to, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss a future episode. And we'll see you next time. Sajit, thanks so much for your time.
Greg. Thank you.